Why don't we go? I'm going to get your presentation up, and Christine, you can kind of take it. Is it okay if you're here? Okay. This is the think about the dancers.
はじめまして、Christine Su です。よろしくお願いします。My name is Christine Su, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Summer Technologies. I'm a Stanford MBA student who's also studying agriculture at the same time, and I just got out of class, so I apologize for being late. So
you can look over here.
Oh, great. So Summer Technologies is the first and only software startup that is making pasture management easier for cattle ranchers. And today I'm going to tell you why grazing management is the future of farming.
Oh, sorry.
Before I do that, I want to talk about my connection to Japan and actually why I'm grateful to Japan for having it all start. Before coming back to my MBA, I was a consultant at McKinsey in Hong Kong for 2 years, and then was working in private equity operations at KKR, also in Hong Kong. And while I'm grateful to those firms for training me well in data analytics and business management, my dream was to go work on a farm in Hokkaido. Which is what I did when I was accepted into Stanford for my MBA. The first thing I did was book a flight to Kyoto, and then I made my way all the way up to Hokkaido, to a little town called Monbetsu. I don't know how many of you have been there. It's about 2,000 people in population, and you can sort of see Russia from the top there. And through an organization called WOOF, which is Worldwide Opportunities for Organic Farming, I worked with a gentleman, Kazunori Kataoka-san, who is an organic farmer of dairy in Hokkaido. He farms about 60 cows, and I learned everything I know about the dairy industry from him. His wife had passed away, and very much like Koide-san's description, he's over the age of 65, and his children are in the city and don't want to work on the farm anymore, so he relies on volunteer help from all over the world through woofing. So I farmed with him for a month, and he was a rotational grazer, which I didn't understand what that was until later on when I visited some of the best New Zealand pasture management farms. But he had electric fencing, he had 8 pastures, and he would rotate his cows every day, 100% on grass, and make sure that the grass rested for a certain period before he went back to it. And his grass was beautiful. This is some of his neighboring land. You can see how beautiful the land is. And he had learned about that in a book, and 3 years later I realized that Katsunori-san was one of the most innovative farmers of his kind, adopting leading-edge rotational grazing methods that the best farms in New Zealand and in California do. The quick takeaway, which I'll go through later in detail, is that pasture management is a mobile platform that does mobile pasture management for cattle ranchers. My co-founder, who's in the back there, who introduced herself, she and I met at an entrepreneurship class at Stanford under Steve Blank, who is the founder of the Lean Startup Method. And his entire mantra is, if you want to get into farming or any industry, don't do anything or build anything until you talk to at least 100 of your potential users, because how do you know what they want unless you talk to your users? So we did that. We talked to 200 farmers from last January to April. We decided to focus on livestock because of personal passion and the link that I had personally, but also because meat supply is such a energy-intensive and resource-intensive industry. So we focus on livestock management, and all over the valley we're hearing that drought and grass management is really important. So we started building this June in the summer. Jennifer and I are still students. We became revenue positive almost immediately. We started showing this prototype to customers and signed on 6 paying customers. We now have 20 ranchers in private beta in 3 countries, New Zealand, Canada, and the US. I would love to have beta ranchers in Japan as well. And that's where we are. We're planning to launch PastureMap in November. Who we are. So I gave a little bit of my background. And I've worked on farms not only in Japan, but since then around other places in the world. And I want to talk about Jennifer, who is currently getting a civil and environmental engineering degree at Stanford, and her passion is to build beautiful, easy-to-use software for regular people to make large-scale climate impact. She gave up her own startup ambitions to work with me and join together to form this company, and previously she had won a Department of Energy award for the best consumer app of interactive gaming to teach consumers about energy use. And personally, both of us have struggled with food allergies all of our lives, and that's how we got into the food industry, reading a lot about how chemicals and antibiotics, as well as what the feedstock is for animals, can affect our microbiome and create inflammation in our bodies. It made us very conscious of what we ate. And as we talked to the farmers, it became clear that the farmers who are aligned with growing the best food are also aligned with having it be sustainable for the earth, for the soil, for consumers. And those are the people that we want to support. This is our team. We have a team of mostly students. We've been bootstrapped until now. We have an iOS and Android developer. And God willing, if we fundraise successfully within the next 3 months, we will be growing our team to be full-time. We also have farmers in the Midwest as well as California and other bigger ranchers that can fit on this slide that are in New Zealand. So as Tim mentioned, California is the #1 agricultural state in the US, and it's home to a $10 billion beef industry with a lot of cows and a lot of ranchers. 90% of them are family-owned, which means that they don't have a ton of personal savings to cushion them, and they run their business out of passion and to make a living, but not a extremely profitable one. And we're currently facing the worst drought in history, which is forcing behavior change across the board. Where previously we saw that only the grass-fed ranchers who rely 100% on pasture manage their grazing land very carefully. Now, halfway through the season, we're in the 3rd year of a 100-year drought, according to meteorologists. A lot of ranchers ran out of water and grass halfway through the season and had to cull 30 to 50% of their herds, which is a huge impact to their business. And pasture management is now not just a nice-to-have environmental issue, it's a survival issue. The problem is that pasture management is really hard. Existing tools, such as the one that Katsunori-san used to use, were whiteboards and maps that he'd drawn himself, that he would rotate his 60 cows each day, which is much more difficult if you have 1,000 cows, or 100 paddocks instead of 8. And the tools that exist aren't easy to update by cowboys who are out on the ranch. This is a cowboy who's taking a picture with a whiteboard and then making sure that he records where he's standing in the field and what the condition is on an iPad. And it's very difficult to derive insights from that. So that's why we built Pasture Map, which is the first online platform that puts together all of the data that a farmer needs to make decisions about his grazing land. Farmers can draw their map layers on Google Earth and edit them every time they change their fencing, which for highly intensive grazing operations is every few days. And then if I'm the farm manager and I have 5 ranchers, I can give them each an iPad, or they have their smartphones, and they can go out, and as they move their herds, which is maybe twice a day, they can take pictures of the grass condition and make notes, have that all be geotagged, so that at any point the farm manager can look across all of the land and see the latest photo history as well as the grass condition and how much grass is left on the land. So then he can make decisions about where he's going to move his herd next, as well as how many days he has to plan before he has to buy supplemental hay. There's a huge mental relief to this. First of all, knowing how many grazing days they have left on the land. If they have several thousand acres, the way that they're currently doing it is driving around on their pickup truck or talking through walkie-talkie or cell phone saying, it's pretty dry in this field, I think we have 3 days left, and then he'll make a note, and it's very clunky. And the ability to plan ahead and know how much leeway he has will make a huge difference on his business. It also allows him to monitor his or her land remotely while he has many staff running around in the field. So the pricing and value that we have for Pasture Map, we priced it for the farmer to afford, but it does pay back in 1 day. So we priced it at a fixed price, $20 a month. and 50 cents per cow, which allows us to scale pricing for small farms to big farms. Big farms pay more because they have more to manage. But with hay prices at $400 a ton right now, which is about a one-day supply of supplemental feed for their herds, PastureMat pays for itself in a day. If even by managing more efficiently, you can find one additional bale of hay across your thousands of acres of land, you pay for yourself, pay for the PastureMat subscription. In addition to that, though, studies have shown that managed grazing, just being able to plan better and know when you're grazing the land, as well as how much time to let it recover by rotating, can increase grass growth by up to 50%, which is a huge amount of savings for a small family ranch. The agriculture department in the US, as well as Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, have been trying to promote managed grazing for about 20 years. Nobody was building these software tools to allow ranchers to do it more efficiently. When cows are moved at a regular schedule, instead of free-ranging all over the land, then they don't have the time to pick and choose the best grass, which makes, if they get to pick and choose and they get a week to pick the best grass, then they'll tear it all up by the roots, and then the next year the weeds will come in and the value of your land asset will decrease over time. By managed grazing intensively and clustering them in one place at a time, letting them only graze down to a certain height, you actually build stronger root systems, which over time, over 3 to 5 years, it's very much like organic composting back into the soil. You're building stronger root systems and increasing the ability of the soil to absorb water. So we're not just saving them several $1,000s here or there during drought, we're actually increasing the ability of the land to absorb water and increasing their ability to grow their most important feed cost over time. This is the traction and timeline that we've had so far. I mentioned that we've only started building in June, had a lot of demand, and then Jennifer and I figured that we should go to the leaders in sustainability and pasture management. So we flew to New Zealand for a month, last month, to interview 20 different dairy, beef, and sheep ranchers in New Zealand. And we found there that this type of rotational grazing, such as the kind that Katsunori-san was using, is leading practice there. And they've been doing it for 20 years because 20 years ago, the New Zealand government eliminated all agricultural subsidies. Something that's difficult for us to imagine in the United States, but the result of removing those subsidies was that farmers had to find the most efficient way of managing their land and growing the most profit out of it, and they use rotational grazing. So it's our dream and our hope that we can get more farmers farming profitably using this method. We also validated that sheep and dairy would also be open to industries for us to expand into. So the market opportunity for this is quite large. As I said, the California cattle industry, it's not just the drought-facing farmers who are wanting this. About 80% of our inbound requests come from outside California. So we are seeing a demand for more efficient land management across the board in 5 different states, 3 different countries. A lot of strong interest from the U.S. grass-fed industry, which is, many of you know, has its roots here in California. There's more and more consumer consciousness of how resource inefficient it is to grow beef. It takes 20 pounds of corn to grow 1 pound of beef, and imagine all of the land resources, the fertilizer, all of the oil and gas that goes into creating that fertilizer and transporting all of that grain, whereas growing it on grass is much more sustainable. And there's a premium for U.S. grass-fed beef. We actually do not have enough beef in the U.S. to supply consumer demand. Chipotle uses all grass-fed beef, and they can't find enough farmers to grow it, so they have to ship it in from Australia. So that is an opportunity for New Zealand, for Japan, for other countries who are more efficient at growing grass-fed beef to take. We think that is going to be an incredible market opportunity over the next 10 years. We think grass-fed is where organic was 10 years ago, and it's going to be driven by consumer demand. And we're going to convert more ranchers, either in the U.S. or globally, to that kind of management. And they're going to need the tools to help them do it because it's a lot harder. They have to watch where the cows are. They can't just let them free range. So that is the macro trend that we're tagging onto. This is a growth opportunity slide that's a little small, but it outlines our ambitions to be a global business first. There's a reason why in the second month of our operation, we set up a month in New Zealand, because we want to learn from the best. And I would be very interested in adding Japan on there. If anyone has connections with the Japanese agricultural industry, have a deep respect and love for the way that Japanese businesses run. In addition to the sheep, beef, and dairy verticals, we also have interest from pastured poultry, pastured pork, as well as any industry that is high value and requires a lot of physical monitoring, such as grapes or specialty produce, which in Salinas and Central Valley, or Napa, there are hundreds of people out there in the fields every day checking on whether the grapes have frost, or checking if the lettuce has mildew, and currently they're using paper. And the entire value of the crop depends on rapid response and imaging, and making sure that you know exactly where the problem is and you can solve it right away. Because, for example, mildew at Tanimura and Atoll takes 2 to 3 days to destroy the entire field. So we're very excited about using the same technology to enable more efficiency and lower costs of damage to specialty crops. There's also a few product extensions to get us to a global business with multiple verticals of products. These are all features that our farmers have asked us for. So once you have hundreds of ranchers using PastureMap across different industries or across different soils, the farmers want to know what other farmers using the same kind of soil that they have and the same climate are getting in terms of grass growth and what methods they're using. So it becomes a platform to share best practices and a platform to benchmark your own performance, which currently doesn't exist anywhere. And we have demand also from farmers who have over 100,000 acres to use drones, which they already own, to do imaging more remotely and do PastureMap for drones. And finally, because we can track how much grass is grown across the land, we can actually benchmark improvement year on year for our farmers. So we can tell specialty growers who sell their meat into market what their baseline carbon offset was for how much grass they grew and what the carbon footprint was each year and how they've improved. So imagine if you had a sticker on your grass-fed beef that said the carbon footprint of this beef is X. You offset this many tons of carbon by buying this beef instead of grain-fed beef, which actually has a negative carbon footprint. That could drive premiums and create additional differentiation in the added value segment for high value beef. I'd be very interested to know how that would match up against Kobe beef and other types of specialty beef that are grown in Japan, and how to capture more of that value for brand partners who are trying to communicate why their beef is different from traditional grain-fed beef. I will probably spend about time, so I'll just skip. We're scaling operations really quickly. We have many partners in the sustainability and conservation industries that we're thinking of working with. There are competitors, mostly in New Zealand, but mostly web-based, and nobody is doing mobile, decision-driven, imaging-based. We like to say we're not your grandfather's farm management system, which was on a computer and looks like a database. It's responsive, it's in your hand, and it's imaging-based, and it helps you make a decision right there instead of acting like an ERP system. Here are advisors, and I'm very excited to talk to everybody here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Christine. We'll go next to Alvaro at eHarvest Hub.